And now, introducing your host, Steve Lags.
So I have a wonderful, extraordinary man here as a guest on the Steve Lags Unfiltered podcast today. Today, I have Ed Hajim with me. Ed Hajim is an extraordinarily successful person. He's had a remarkably successful career in the financial industry, more than 50 years of investment experience. Right now, he is the chairman of High Vista Strategies. They manage $10 billion in assets. And his resume is just incredible. If I just were to go through it, we would take the next 10 minutes to go through it. But president of Diker he's been president of Diker Management. He's been chairman, CEO of MLH Capital. It goes on and on and on. And I'm gonna skip through that because not only has he been successful on a financial aspect in life and created wealth, not only for himself, but for so many other people, but he's also somebody that's very generous. He's also, he's very grateful. He has a lot of gratitude in life. And over the past few years here, Ed has really opened up his life and been more transparent in sharing a lot of his experiences with the rest of us. And we're going to walk through that journey here today. Ed, thanks for joining us today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I really appreciate it. You know, it's interesting because I know you're an extraordinarily successful person, and everybody has their definition of success, what that really looks like in life. It's a little bit unique and different for everybody. You know, typically people think, just money enough is going to make you successful. And I think that we're going to hear from you that it's not that simple in life. It just maybe just amplifies who you really are. When you think about, you reflect on life, Ed, and when you think about success, what is success for you?
Yeah, pardon me, I'm going to reflect back on my book. In my book, I talk about 4 parts of life: self, family, work, and community. My word for giving back. And to be successful in life, you have to be successful in all 4 areas. It's very difficult. It's a juggling act, but you must be successful with yourself. You must understand yourself. You have to, obviously, the family, which is the most important thing, because it's what's left over, when everything is said and done. And of course, work is where you make your living and make your mark. On the other hand, community, which is sort of the 4th part of life, as far as I'm concerned, is giving back. And if you don't give back, you've missed out on a huge part of life. So being successful is being successful in each of these areas. And then I used an expression that was taught to me by a professor at the business school, Howard Stevenson: just enough. You have to do just enough. See, the idea of balance is not correct. You're never going to be in balance. But I'm talking about a harmony between these 4 things. And all through your life, you spend your time moving back and forth, trying to improve yourself, making sure your family's in place. Obviously, you have to work, because if you don't work, you'll never make a living and never make your mark. And then when you get all done, you have to have been contributed to the planet in your spare time. But it's really, it sounds complex because it is. Life is a complicated experience, but these 4 things in my mind define success. Ultimately, success is a personal experience. How do you feel when you're done? And I find that 4th area, both family and community to me, look at my successful work experience. I was the chairman. I would work for the firms on Wall Street: E.F. Hutton, Capital Research, Lehman Brothers. I was the CEO of Furman Cells, which sold itself to Xerox and so forth. All those companies are gone. Hutton's gone. Lehman's gone. Furman Cells is gone. But the other things I've done, like the University of Rochester or the Nantucket Golf Club, they're going to be here forever.
Right.
So since those are more successful experiences than my work experience. Some people may, be more successful at work than I was, but in many respects, work kind of disappears, and your family stays on, and your contribution to community stays on.
I love this idea of you're never going to get balance, because I think that's a real big misconception in society today, where everyone's looking for their work-life balance or balance in their life. And it's really never going to exist. And when you use the word that I haven't heard before with that, it's more about harmony and being successful with yourself and work. how does it allow you to be more successful with your family and your community?
Well, first of all, to be successful community in today's world, it's a little bit crass, but you have to have certain financial resources to be successful in community today. Because almost every organization, the one thing they need is more funding. So
Right.
that's why one of the reasons you work. And then just enough in my life at age 72, I decided to stop, the struggle to make money because I had just enough. I was enough to make a contribution to the University of Rochester and spend time as the chairman of the board of trustees. Everybody has to figure that out. But you just said it very well. And I say this to people, you're always going to be out of balance because to be successful in any one area, you must focus. Once you focus on work, you neglect self and family. So the key is what I call harmony. You focus on one area to be successful, and you move back in the other area because you're a little out of harmony and out of balance.
Right.
And this is what life is all about. It's like people say to me, "Why are you married so long?" I said, because every once in a while I tell my wife we're going to go away and be alone for a weekend. Or in early marriage, I must admit that what saved my marriage was going on 4-day car trips so we could learn about each other again. So these are the kind of rebalancing program. Or yourself, you decide to, not drink too much, not eat too much, and take that 5 pounds off in the next, 6 months. So those are the kinds of rebalancing act that you have to be successful. Because ending up with lots of money and with a 45-inch waist and and divorce, that's not success. Or
that's right.
If you get a chance to do something like I did, we founded the Nantucket Golf Club, which is, I feel pretty proud of that. But today, it's the largest charity on the island. We've got 70 kids in schools today, which are financed by scholarships from our club. Now it's an institution. So those are the kinds of things that, on my mind, define success. Also, success in life, as you get older, the community becomes more important. Right. Early on, you must be successful in work. There's just no two ways about it, because you do have to make a living. You do have to make your mark. And if you don't understand how to do that, then you really haven't lived.
Yeah. And then you're developing yourself. You're becoming more qualified to be able to contribute to your community as you develop the skills, the wisdom, the knowledge, the financial success. And then, like you said, when you have enough, if you have too much, you just give it back to the community, whether it's information or it's money. You're able to make greater contributions. And in that early part of your life, really focusing on that and getting that foundation started is so important, because you get such incredible returns on it over the years of your life. The faster you get started and the more concentrated you are on that.
That's absolutely right. Self is a very interesting one, because in some sense, you have no control over yourself for your early part of your life. Think about it. You're a combination of your genes and your environment. Either one, you don't control either one of those. And in my book, the young man is dropped off at an island. Obviously, it's a fable, and that's an allegory. About 18 or 20 years old, you get either a first job, or you're dropped off at a school away from your parents. For the first time, you look at yourself. You say, who am I? Why am I this person? Am I the kind of person I want to be? If I'm not, I'm going to be this other person. How am I going to get from here to there? And that's a whole focus that usually you spend your college years doing that in some part of your early life, sort of reshaping yourself. In my case, my father was a somewhat of an angry man, and I was kind of an angry kid. I had to work on that,
right,
to change that part of my personality, part of my genealogical makeup.
Yeah, that's right. So at that point, once you become a young adult, you can start controlling that environment. You can start deciding how you want to behave and respond in certain situations. Like, you could be working on yourself and developing yourself, and you begin to have things in your control at that point once you start getting into the world as a young adult.
That's exactly. People have to recognize that there is it's a line you cross. All of a sudden, you are a young adult, and you are more responsible for yourself, and you have to find out exactly who you are, the good points and the bad points, and you want to change them. You have to start changing them, and it's a habit you have to develop. And people don't. Some people get into their late 20s or even early 30s, or they get married. They haven't dealt with themselves yet, and that's what one of my pitches. I want college students. This is one of my new crusades. Is have college students take a course when they're freshmen and start to think about themselves. It's called life design. So the kid graduates with a diploma and a life design written in pencil. where he goes through himself, where he wants to go, how she expects to get there, why they want to get there, and also looking at the kind of experience. Who do I want to be in 10 years and why? These kinds of questions. I want those asked earlier than they are asked now. People, wander out into the society, take a job because it's available, or go to a geographical location. My grandson just transferred from Chicago to upper state, Washington State, happy as a clam. He was he's an outdoor guy, and it's very different living in Chicago than living in your building in Washington.
Yeah.
So geography is important for who you are. What do you really enjoy? And I can spend the day on this, Steve. So you better drift me away. My daughter always says, "Dad, you answer the questions too long." So.
No, you're doing amazing. You got so much incredible information. So a couple of things I grabbed onto what you just mentioned here. So having a plan. So many people just drift through life, and life just kind of takes them wherever they go. Wherever, there's a prevailing wind, it's going to take you in a certain direction, and they just end up somewhere. And it takes a lot of focus and energy and intentionality in life to get to where you specifically want to be, because you're going to probably have to swim upstream at times. You're going to really need to be able to putting a lot of energy into it. But I think the most important thing you just said there is, where do you want to be in 10 years and why? Because I always say that, you don't have to like the thing you're doing, but you have to like the reason why you're doing it. And it becomes about the purpose. Yeah. So it really comes about the purpose. If I set a goal and I don't know why that end goal is important to me, I'm unlikely to accomplish it because I haven't connected with the purpose of it and why do I want to really do it. But if I really truly connect with it and wow, this is really meaningful to me, and this is going to serve an amazing purpose, I can imagine what it's going to be like. I can experience it 10 years before it even happens. I'm much more likely to be focused and put my energy into it.
You're perfect. I want to give you perfect examples of this. When I wrote my plans early on, I was a math and science genius, and so I decided to become a physicist. What your plan does for it gives you where you should be testing. So I took an advanced physics course in my sophomore year rather than the engineering course. I was an engineer. I looked around and I said, these are not my people. I can't compete. I don't like this. I'm on it. Then I was able to cross off physics, okay? Now, the same thing happened to me in graduate school because I loved to travel. I was good in languages. I wanted to be an international businessman, but this was in the 60s. And so the summer I tested. I worked for a Belgian chemical company, and everybody spoke Flemish and French, and it was owned by the Baron. You couldn't get ahead. Nobody listened to you. And it was just too early in doing, international business. Then the next summer I said, well, if I can't take over Europe, I'll decide I'll take over a country. So I went to Central America. I became fluent in Spanish. I worked in Nicaragua. And I was putting a business school together there with George Cabot Lodge. Found out that was not a good idea. So what I learned was, although I thought I wanted to be a businessman because I wrote it down, international businessman was not a good place. Mm-hmm. But my plan made me test that.
Right.
Because so many times the moniker of something, the name of it, really doesn't tell the story.
Right.
The same way when I graduated business school, I had decisions between being an analyst and a banker. And a banker sounds much better. I remember one fellow telling me, oh, you can't be an analyst. They're gophers. Bankers are eagles. And, the eagles, I met a few of them. They were sitting in a room with no windows. There were 4 of them with lots of papers on them. Those are bankers. And I went to this company to make me an analyst. He said, well, in 3 months, you'll be flying off to visit companies. So the gopher flies off. The eagle sits in a dark room with no windows. So, you have to be careful what people call things.
Right.
So you just said something. You gotta find out what you're doing is very, what physically are you doing to understand yourself and whether that's something you want to do. But writing a plan allows you to test certain things, or forces you to say, this is what I want to do. Let's test it out.
Yeah, and that sounds like it's working on yourself. It's self-discovery. You discovering the world, discovering the opportunities, and discovering yourself during the experience and during that process.
I mean, I spent my whole life not willing to talk about myself. Now I'm spending all my time talking about myself.
How does that feel?
That's a change.
Yeah. Are you enjoying it? Because you look like you enjoy it.
I'm getting terrific satisfaction.
Oh, that's awesome.
My pitch is, when we talk for a half hour or an hour, if you get one thing out of it that helps you, then I feel pretty good. And I've gotten some letters from one mother wrote me and said her daughter read my book and now she didn't know what she was going to do. Now she's a freshman in college. So, she decided to go to school. That's all you need to take satisfaction.
So rewarding.
I have messages. I mean, I can convince anybody that anything is possible. I mean, how I started, and also that your beginning doesn't define your end. That's for sure. These are cliches, but they really work.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that because, so somebody listening to you right now that doesn't really know your story might have made some assumptions that, wow, he's had a pretty, easy life in order to be able to be as intelligent and successful and to be as articulate as he is right now. Maybe he had it pretty easy because I'm looking at the tip of the iceberg and it looks pretty awesome. What's the truth? Where's the journey start?
No, my father and mother got divorced when I was 3. Dad came over on the boat in 1900, became very successful, involved in the technology at the time called radio, made lots of money. 2932, lost everything, losing both of his parents, and he got a lot of demons. He did get married. When my birth certificate said I was born to an unemployed father and a homemaker mother. He was a pretty tough guy to get along with. She divorced him when I was 3 years old. She got custody. She took me to St. Louis, where she was living, Los Angeles. My father came. He had visiting rights on Sunday, picked me up, and instead of taking me to the park, he got back on Highway 66 and basically kidnapped me and told my mother never to look for us and told me that she died and I would never see her. And so I was 3 years old. Dad was then a radio operator aboard a merchant ship. And when he was in town, we were in expensive hotels. When he was out of town, I stayed with friends and I didn't have any relatives, neighbors. And then the war broke out. I ended up in 5 foster homes in Los Angeles, 5 Catholic foster homes, which varied from being, cold and abusive actually, because those days foster homes took you because they made for the money. Last one was pretty warm and caring. And then Dad wanted me back after the war. So I flew to the East Coast alone on a DC-10, 5 stops. And we ended up in the YMCA on 34th Street for the summer. And then in a hotel room in Coney Island. Dad looked for land-based work, didn't work. And I had a pretty good year, 106. And actually in August, I was supposed to stay with a neighbor lady, and he took off on his first new experience going back into the radio opera business, took a ship, left town and said, well, she decided she wasn't going to take me. So I spent that part of that summer in the hotel room by myself. Come September, she decided not to take me. And luckily he got me into an orphanage in Far Rockaway. And I did pretty well there because the first time in my life where I actually had community and consistency, there was a little bit of a rites of passage. Orphan homes weren't so fabulous in those days, but this one was pretty good. And when I was 14, the old man completely abandoned me, disappeared completely. I became a ward of the state. And luckily, some nice social work got me into a second orphanage. And that orphanage was near a very good high school. And the rest of the story is I got a scholarship and went off to the University of Rochester in my black leather jacket and a suitcase full of the wrong clothes. Was immediately rejected by all the fraternities. But being at college was much better than being in the orphanage. That's a thumbnail sketch. There's lots of little goodies in there besides in my book.
Yeah.
But
and that the name of that book is On the
Road Less Traveled.
Yep.
It's On the Road Less Traveled. It's the unlikely journey from the orphanage to the boardroom. And that was the fellow wrote the book, The Road Less Traveled, was Scott Peck, wonderful. I've read his book a number of times. And I just traveled so many roads that people haven't traveled that when my publicist said, that sounds like a good name, so it called On the Road Less Traveled. Driving from St. Louis to Los Angeles, where I was 3 years old, and he was taking me back to Los Angeles. He said he told me my mother died and I'd never see her. And that's another part of the book you can get to. I do find her after 57 years, but I'll save that one.
Wow. 57 years later.
Yeah, I knocked on her door in St. Louis and said, I'm your son. 57 years late.
And that book you can find on Amazon.com.
That's
now,
right.
An incredible story, overcome that. So when you think about, the obstacles, the disadvantages that you had in growing up in life as a child, really tough, really tough childhood, not the ideal scenario by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, I
Do
lived in
you
15
think,
or 18 different places before I was 18 years old. It
wow,
was, yeah, and the orphanages were, there was a rites of passage. But let me, you mentioned the magic word, all these disadvantages.
right.
See, a lot of these disadvantages become advantages when you get older.
Tell me about that.
Think about that. I mean, if you live in 15 different places, some like Navy brats and so forth, you get very adaptable. In fact, I always tell the story. You go from one schoolyard to the next schoolyard to the next schoolyard, you are become battle weary pretty quickly, but you learn a lot.
Yes.
You learn how to fit in pretty quickly. You learn how to adapt. You also gain a certain amount of resilience because
Mm,
of this and perseverance. And you also learn that basically, that you want a better life. And so these disadvantages early on become advantages. In fact, people in my milieu now, people I live with, live in fancy neighborhoods. Is what should I do? I can't put my son in an orphanage. And I said, make him make him uncomfortable. Send
yeah.
them on outward bound. Send them on Knowles. Get them a job in a mental hospital in Kentucky or something. But
Right.
early on, young people get trained to handle certain things. If you grow up in a good community with two nice parents, and everything's good for you, you get out in the real world, not so easy. But
Yeah.
if you're like me, everything seemed to get better all my life. So,
So that,
I say you can really turn disadvantages into advantages, and kids that go through difficult circumstances early on. And I lecture young people who come from foster homes and so forth. I said, you're very lucky because you now survived and succeeded with all these challenges.
right.
You've got capabilities that other people don't have. So that's why I say testing early on is very important. Long answer, short question. Sorry.
So, I've seen you speak about this before because, obviously you're also a great leader to have all this success. And I like to say that when your most important job in life as a leader is going to be parenting if you have children. And if you're a successful adult, there's entrepreneurs that are successful and other business leaders and that are successful listening to this podcast that have children. One of the obstacles their children are going to have is if they're not dealing with any disadvantages where everything is provided for them and they don't struggle. And, my wife and I talk about this quite a bit where we almost create certain circumstances to create disadvantages and create obstacles for them and let them overcome them because we know we intentionally need to create them because we've been able to create an incredible life for them. Because otherwise they get into the real world and it's going to hit them hard in the face and they're not going to learn how to adapt. Just for example, moving schools. They've moved schools like 3 times in 3 years. And most people are looking at us, oh my God, why are you doing that to your children? And I know this is the best thing that could possibly be happening to them right now.
Exactly right.
Because they're going to learn to adapt and make friends.
It's reverse psychology. It's not, doesn't seem logical, but it's absolutely true. Once they change schools a couple of times, life, they can change jobs and so forth. They can change environments. They can change locations. And my daughter has 3 boys. She sends them to a school where the kids sleep in tents. Very important. That's very healthy.
So do you think that there's life-defining moments and obstacles in life? Do those define you, or is it how you respond and what you learn from those moments that define you in life?
I like to boil it down as never be a victim. Whenever something happens to you, don't try to fight that particular thing. Don't fight that particular thing. Basically, figure out what's next. Instead of using your energy to take on something, basically look at what's next and focus on that kind of experience, whether it's your fault or not. Doesn't make it. And 2 of my experiences, when I was at Lehman Brothers, I did everything right, and they still kind of threw me out. If you read the book, I mean, I did it right, but boss and I didn't get along. But I could afford him because I was the chairman of 3 or 4 outside companies with outside boards. Rather than that, I earned a little bit, I learned a little bit, I focused on the next thing, and I found my dream job. I also believe in a little bit of flow. there's reasons for everything. But most importantly, don't basically worry about these. If the moment comes up, always worried about what's next.
Right.
And in many respects, it'll help you out quite a bit because there's reason for it. But there are defining moments, though. I could still see the moment I got the scholarship. My senior year of high school, I had no way possible could I go to a private college. I can still see the letter in my eyes. There it was. It's perfect. It was right there at it. Having gone out to California to my first company and having the lady I've only married follow me out there, that was a defining moment. So they're defining moments. I'm meeting my mother, of course, after 57 years. Right. I've been very lucky. I've had a lot of defining moments. In fact, just give you a real interesting example. I came to Nantucket at age 60 years old. I was a trustee of a university. I was the CEO of an investment bank, and I got rejected at the local golf club for some reason. We don't want to argue about that. Rather than fighting that or leaving the island, I built my own golf course. And, I found the land. I called this guy, a friend of mine in Colorado. We built one in Colorado. He came out. He's a professional. We built a golf course, and I became member number one. There was no greater experience than a ninth hole when you're going to the gate up there, the freshman stand, and Kelly says to you, "What's your number?" Number one. So that all came then converting the golf club into an institution on the island where we have scholarships. We started with 2 scholarships, and now we have 15 a year. This is a great experience. But if I could have I would have focused on the guys rejecting me. The place doesn't like me. I'm going to get out of here. No, find what's next? Next was to find some land to build a golf course. And by the way, building a golf course is one of the great experiences of all time. I call it art with a bulldozer. Take this beautiful 300 acres of land. You try to keep it as pretty as possible. And right. By the way, you change 300 people's lives too, because that's we spend more time at our golf club than people spend sometime in their houses. So anyway, those kinds of experiences, when you say defining moments, all people have defining moments. The key to at that moment, what you said, how you react to it.
Yes.
If you fight it, if it's negative, or even if it's positive, if you get too full of yourself, I'm the greatest. That's a big mistake too.
Yes.
You have a great, and I have this idea that the most important thing when people praise you is to try to deflect it. See how you feel when you deflect it. Say, Steve, you're a terrific guy. Ed, you really deserve most of the credit. Or Mary Sue should be. All of a sudden, the person who's talking to you feels good. You feel good. And those other people find out. And by the way, nobody does anything alone, as you know.
Yes.
So giving other people credit is, but your idea was absolutely right. How you react to it is so much more important than the event itself.
Well, just say, there's a reason the windshield's really big and a rear view mirror is really small. You got to be looking through that windshield in life and moving forward and not get caught up in the past. You just mentioned something about doing it with people. And I know you talk about this in your book and the importance of mentors in life. And I know that was important for you because you didn't have family to lean into and you needed to get mentors in life. We could talk a little bit about that, but a lot of people struggle just with understanding the concept of mentors or think that they actually need mentors to become more fulfilled in life and more successful in life. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Being there, done that is very important. Going to talk to somebody who's been there. I will tell you the truth, though, and I got a question yesterday on a podcast that basically said he was a foster counselor. And he said, they all reject me. Why? I said, because they don't trust you. And I didn't trust anybody. As a child, if you get abandoned a few times or you get transferred around, you don't trust people. You basically are on yourself. But I luckily had enough mentors along the way. This fellow at the orphanage was a super guy, and he really just kept working on me until I finally sort of accepted the fact that he could help me. My first year in college, I had trouble getting through mechanical drawing, and the professor there took me under his wing for 4 years. And he got me through mechanical drawing, too. That was important, because that's the first step in being an engineer. So all through your life, having mentors and seeking them out, by the way, I didn't seek them out because I didn't trust anybody. But by the time I got out of business school, I started to realize it because I had a couple of business school professors who were really mentors. I used to seek people out. For example, as a young man on Wall Street, I was 28 years old. and I was transferred. I was the manager of the New York office for this firm. I sought out two old guys at one of the brokerage firms. They were both in their 70s because they'd been there, done that.
Right.
I could talk about what the real world was all about.
Yeah.
So seeking out mentors and seeking out mentors in particular areas, having a coach, if you're an athlete, you automatically accept mentoring,
Right.
because that coach is going to tell you, when to cut and when to catch the pass. And it's easy if you're an athlete, but other people sort of go through life and don't seek out mentors. Mentors are very important. By the way, in high school, I'm involved in a group called Wiley, and what they do up in Boston is she has 75 kids. They get a scholarship to Tufts or MIT, and these kids then go. The financial office calls Wiley, and Wiley assigns a counselor to that person. So the person must talk to his counselor at least every couple of weeks. And of course, it sounds like it's not important, except in COVID, these foster kids had no place to go. They just called up their counselor. The counselor got them someplace to go, or they called up the counselor. I need $100 for some cosmetics. They were able to provide it. So the mentoring thing is absolutely key. And as early in your life, if you can seek out mentors, you're much better off. Going it alone doesn't work. As I say in my book, I was only as good as the people I surrounded myself with. So.
Yeah, and that's the important thing, having a team and surrounding yourself with the best people that are aligned with what you want to accomplish or have already accomplished what you're looking to accomplish in some aspect of life so that you can learn from them. And you're an ideal example of that, because typically people that have that experience and success and knowledge are looking to give it back to somebody who's hungry to do something bigger and better than they did and learn from them, because it's so fulfilling to be able to give back to others that are really, truly, genuinely seeking it and are going to actually do something with the information.
You said it better than I could. Exactly right. You get on the road, you look ahead 10 years, you find somebody who's been on that road for 10 years, you go and talk to them, and you get not all the problems solved because each person is different. Each road changes. In my book, again, the idea you dip your foot into the river. When you dip your foot into the river, you're never the same. The river's never the same. But in many respects, if you go along that path, you go find someone who's been along that path, you're much, much better off.
Amazing. I have one last question for you, Ed. I know that you talked about in the past here and a little bit in the book about not having control, produce a strong drive to seek freedom as a goal. When you think about freedom as a goal, what is freedom for you in life?
Freedom is a lot of words. It's a huge continuum. Mine was I wanted to control my own life. So what did that drive me to do? It drove me to work for smaller companies where I would have more control over the experience.
Right.
In other words, in a smaller company, I also drives you to be the boss. And you have certain characteristics that you have to develop if you want to really be a good boss. And then, it's the opposite again of what people think. People think as a boss, a guy who's controlling everything. No. You want to have as least control as possible. I mean, when I bought the company back, I distributed 80% of the stock to 20 different people, and then the other 20% to another 200 people. I mean, I didn't have to come to work because they were carrying the rocks up the hill. And freedom for me was to have daily control over my life, so that if you work for a smaller company and you're the CEO, at 5:30, if you want to go home to dinner, go home to dinner. But on the other hand, if you work for Lehman Brothers and the guy calls you up and says, we'd like you to, at 6:30 fly to Los Angeles, you can't go home to dinner. So It was a big difference. I had to learn that because I did work for a big company for a while, and a fancy company. I was a big shot. I was on the board. I was a major partner. But, if they called you, you had to go.
Yes.
So when I made that pivot at age 47, instead of going to another famous firm, I went to a little firm where I could, one, exercise my passions, two, put my principles into place, hire the partners I wanted, and I had this freedom in addition, and to make the plans and make the thing work. So, at some point in your life, you can do that. You can't do it at the very beginning. We talked about that earlier. Sometimes you have to pull off your passions. And you have to take, I was an engineer for a while because that's what I was trained in.
Right.
But I went to business school at night and found out that was more interesting to me. Then I went full time. And then I learned that that's really what I want to do with my life. But that freedom is something that, again, that's only one principle, though. As I say, in that principle section of my book, there's a lot of principles that you have to really learn. Some principles last a lifetime, like the golden rule. And some principles fade away, like my principle on Wall Street was to live happy to live hidden. I had to go, and now I've discarded that principle, as you can tell.
We're not hiding you anymore. But
You don't want this thing in, do you? I mean, we're having such a good time. Come on.
I know. I'm just thinking about, I don't know when next time you come to South Florida, I'm taking you to dinner.
Well, I live in Ocean Reef, so.
Oh.
In the Keys.
Okay.
We've been down there for 40 years.
That's great. Oh, well, I got a reason to come down and visit you.
That's another thing I tell young people: get into real estate early on.
Right.
Find some place that you like to live. You live a long time. And we've been very lucky in real estate. I'm in Nantucket, Ocean Reef, Vail, New York City. I've done a lot of real estate investing over time. Most places I really want to live.
Right.
And that's another whole. And my oldest grandson, I want to buy him a house and some sort of places he wants to live. And my wife's very good at decorating everything, so we've been very lucky. But Florida we went to Florida in 1979. Went to Ocean Reef, and I didn't have a dime in my name. The guy says to me, "Give me $5,000, you can buy this condominium because they can't sell them." I said, "How much is it?" He says, "$105,000." But he said, "I'll rent the dock. I'll rent the place, and you'll never pay anything." He got me a mortgage, which I didn't look at, 13.5%. But sure enough, I got a check for $100 or $200 every couple of months, and I never paid a dime. And a very funny story on that. About 2 years later, the university called me and said, "We'd like a contribution." I said, "I have no money." They said, "We saw your boat." Because this condominium had a dock, and he was renting the dock out to a 100-foot boat. I said, "Not my boat."
That's hilarious. Ed, well, hey, listen, this has been amazing conversation, so much value for the audience. I know that my audience is going to learn so much from you here today. A couple things. 2 books, On the Road Less Traveled and The Island of the 4 Ps, both on Amazon.com. Anything else besides those books, Ed, that they can learn more to reach you or learn more about you?
The most important thing, those books are also on audio.
Okay.
The second book is only 2.5 hours, and the gal did 6 voices, which is kind of fun. And again, the second book is a fable. You look back in life, fables have really been the way to communicate ideas. Gulliver's Travels, Don Quixote, Who Moved My Cheese sold 20 million copies. So I want to this fable. I really want to be as a foundation for asking the questions that allow you to make better decisions in life. I have a concept that the only real 2 constants in life. One is your inner voice, and the second is change. And I'm trying to get a vocabulary that allows your inner voice to make better decisions on the changes which are going to occur. And that's another long answer, short question. Thank you, Steve. This has been delightful. I had more fun. This was great. This is really a nice afternoon. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. And thanks so much for joining us, Ed. Hey, guys, that's Steve Lags Unfiltered, Ed Hajim. What an amazing guest. We'll see you on the next episode of the Steve Lags Unfiltered.
That's all for today's Steve Lags Unfiltered Journey. Subscribe, rate, and leave a review to fuel your success journey. Also, be sure to listen to us on your favorite podcast channel or outlet. Stay tuned, stay unfiltered, and we'll catch you on the flip side.